At Catch the Fire, we really value family and we really want to support you to do family life well during this current situation. I'm Laura Densham, I'm one of the lead pastors at Catch the Fire in Manchester. Alongside my sister Becky, my friend Natalie, we are doing a project which will be a series of videos talking about homeschooling. The three of us were home educators before the lockdown, so we really want to share our experiences with you, tips and helpful hints that perhaps you might find helpful. So we hope you enjoy this series.
Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk Home Ed. Sounds like a show. So last week, if you missed it, we did a video discussing how to manage your time, how to have time to yourself while home educating, how to have time with God, and just some practical tips in there, which hopefully you found helpful. We've had a bit of feedback, so we have a few other discussion points, some questions that people have raised. So we're just going to jump straight in. So one of the main questions that we've had, and actually that I have, is how to home educate when you have lots of children of different ages. I know that's a big one out there, and we've all got different age children, haven't we? So the experience will be different for all of us, but I'm sure the wisdom would be really helpful. So let's go to Natalie first.
So my children's ages, I've got slightly older children than you two. So the way we would do it at the moment, one example I can think of, this week I've been working with Daniel, who's 14, on the Treaty of Versailles for his history homework, or his history work. And whilst we've been doing that, my youngest daughter, Annabelle, sat in the same room. I think she was colouring, actually. Colouring or reading, I'm not sure which it was. So we're sat on the computer talking away about First World War leading to the Second World War and the treaty, and then and how there was 20 years between the two wars, you see. And then Annabelle sort of chipped in and said, shall I wonder whether and this sounds ridiculous, but yes, I wonder whether the architecture in 1960 was so horrible, in her opinion, because they were expecting 20 years after World War II, another war to come. And so they thought, let's build buildings that, are just functional, basically. So we both turned around and looked at her and thought, where did she come up with this? But so I think for her, even though it looks like, she's not involved, she's in the room, but it's not really for her age group, she was sort of chipping in with her ideas of what she thought people could have been thinking after World War II, which just blew me away, really. I was just sat there thinking, oh my goodness, how is she thinking these thoughts? But so I think as they get older, especially with home education, you don't, and I think you start that earlier on, you don't start to see them as year groups anymore. You don't think Annabelle is year 6, Daniel is year 9, I will only speak to Daniel in this way, I'll only speak to Annabelle in that way. It just becomes, like we said in other episodes, part of your family. So it's a family discussion. So whether it's not particularly aimed at them, they still will get something out of it, the younger ones. I don't know how you find it, Laura or Becky, because you've got younger children than me, but that's an example I can think of from this week.
I'm finding the same thing, actually, because Eli's 5 and Josiah's 3. And I find that Josiah gets very, like, if Eli gets his workbook out, Josiah's like, I want to do my school. And I'm not doing school as such with him, but I'll get out his colouring book or something that he can do as well. And he'll come and sit at the table next to Eli because he wants to do his school as well. And I think it's so good, even at an early age, to get them excited about learning, like we mentioned last week. So even you know, I just get Josiah really excited about, do you want to do your school? And even if it's not technically school, although everything is learning, he likes to come and sit with us at the big table and kind of join in with that. So even at a young age, they're liking to do things together and learn together. Eli's he gets a bit cheeky sometimes because he's like, Zaya, come and help me with mine, and then gets him to do some of his work for him. She's very clever, but very cheeky. But yeah, it's just kind of learning how to kind of teach them together, isn't it? Even though they're at different levels. Laura, do you have any practical advice on how to do that? Because you've got different ages, don't you?
I do. So I have, my youngest is 3, and then I have a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 11-year-old. So one, I'm kind of prepping to come into school, like primary school, I guess, age, and then my oldest is going into secondary school age. Excuse me. So there's a whole, 4 different levels of learning. But actually, love what you were saying, Natalie, is that when one kid is working on one thing, then the other kids will see and be like, oh, I want to have a go at that, or it starts their learning juices flowing, if that's even a saying. And we found that as well with our 3-year-old, that she's like, oh, I want to do it, because she sees the older 3 doing it. And so we've actually started doing phonics with her, and she loves it, and she's now claimed the letters that she's learned as her letters. So if anyone says she's like, no, that's my letter. It's just super cute. And but it's like what you said, Becky, that we want them to enjoy learning. So if they're showing an interest, absolutely go for it. But I think that was the biggest question when I first started home educating, is how do you do it with a toddler? Because my youngest was, I think she just turned 2 when we started, and she's a little bit cheeky, and so it's hard to be focusing on something with the older 3. And trying to keep an eye on my youngest as well, to make sure she's not getting up to mischief. And that was the biggest question that I'd ask my friend who's a home educator, like, how do you do it with little ones? And she said, oh, they go to nursery. So I was like, okay, great. Which obviously we can't do right now. We've, everyone has all the kids at home. So that's not helpful information currently. But I remember watching a video the other day that just said, when you're starting your day, see to your child who's the most needy, who needs the most attention and most help, and set them up with something first. And she was talking about her youngest one, who if you go straight into doing your school stuff with the older ones and the youngest ones, what about me? And for my youngest one, she won't really start a game herself, but if you set something up for her, she'll get into it and then play with her for 10 minutes or something, and then I'll be back in a minute, I'm just going to go and check on the older ones, and they're quite good at setting their own stuff up for school and getting on with it, but obviously will need my help. So it is a bit of a balancing act of jumping from one child to another. And I've also, one of the things that stressed me out the most at the beginning was that they all, when they needed help, it was just straight, Mummy, I need your help. And you'd hear that like 4 times in stereo. I'm like, I can't help you all at once. And so now that we've got into a rule of if you want Mummy's attention or my help, then if you see that I'm helping someone else or in the middle of a conversation, just come over and put your hand on my shoulder so I know that you need help. And when I finish with them, then I'll come straight to you. And that's really, really helped. I don't know if that really answers the question, but I've found that really does help in our home life. It's a lot less stressful when they're all shouting for help, but you just know, okay, I've acknowledged you, I'll be with you in a minute, and then just kind of taking it in turns. But yeah, I do feel for those who have got little babies and toddlers, because obviously they're very dependent on you for everything. So it's hard to be able to balance it all. Becky, what do? You've got a newborn baby.
Oh, well. So I feel like I just started to kind of master it a little bit with the older two. What I generally do with that, I mean, Josiah's really good at independent play, so he's absolutely fine to play while I do school with Eli. But saying that, I don't always like to just be like, you go off and play while we do school. I like to give him attention as well. So what we started doing is trying to learn things through games, which is really helpful for Eli as well, because he seems to engage more. So, for example, excuse me, I was following this account on Instagram, and I've forgotten what it's called. What's Busy Toddler or something like that? I will find out, and we will add it to this link. But there was loads of really good ideas on there, and one of them was she got a piece of paper with capital letters on, and magnets with the lowercase letters on, and she got her child to match the lowercase with the capital. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea for Eli to kind of learn which one's which. And I also have a puzzle with the numbers 1 to 20, which Josiah's learning his numbers. So what I did was I did a treasure hunt. So I hid all the numbers and all the letters in the garden. And then it was a game that they could both engage in. So Josiah was looking for the numbers and then coming back and putting them on the puzzle. And Eli was looking for the letters and coming back and matching the lowercase with the capital. So I'm always trying to think of games where I can teach Eli, but also that Josiah can get involved in as well, so that we're kind of learning as a family. The other week we played punctuation corners. So we played the game of corners, but one corner was a question mark and one corner was an exclamation mark, and that kind of information will go over Josiah's head, but he can still engage in the game, whereas for Eli he's learning at the same time. So I feel like we were slowly kind of conquering that. And then I had another baby a month ago, so that's just thrown another fun part into home education. I'm still just trying to work it out. There's definitely been moments where I've had all three of them screaming, which I'm so grateful that my husband's working from home at the moment, because in those moments I can just kind of call on him to help me. But yeah, I think what I'm kind of learning is to just be flexible, because you just have to. If my youngest needs feeding, then we'll have to pause workbook work in that moment so I can feed the baby. And you just have to learn to be flexible and be okay with that. But I would definitely appreciate wisdom on that. I just mentioned quickly, my mother-in-law is a homeschool genius. She homeschooled her 9 children. She's still going, actually, with the youngest. And what she said was she would, part of the children's work was to look after the baby. So they would all the older ones would take it in turns to look after the younger one, because there was always a baby in the house. And that's incredible learning as well. Like, I look at my husband now, and he's the best dad I've ever seen. Like, he's so good with the kids, and I believe that's because he's had that time growing up learning how to look after a baby, learning how to play with a baby, and this all life lessons, isn't it, that he's learned through that. So I'm trying to encourage my older two to entertain the baby at moments as well, and they're absolutely loving it. They love reading to him, they love playing with him. I mean, he's still a newborn, so he's not quite engaging with them, but they're absolutely loving it. So yeah, Laura, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to add the same, actually, is that when my youngest gets a bit antsy and is desperate for a playmate, then I will pluck one of the kids out, like, oh, you've done a good chunk of maths, go and play on the trampoline now with your sister, and they'll take it in turns, like, because they get to a point when they've done a couple of subjects that they can have a break time, and they actually look, oh, I'll go and play with her now because it's break time, and they get to have that little bit of time playing together as well. And so I think that's worked really well, actually, following that, of that they get to take it in turns to play with their little sister, and it's a break for them from their work as well. So they look forward to it, and my little one's happy.
So a lot of people have kind of given us a bit of feedback on the last video. One of the things that came up was obviously having more than one child and how you kind of manage that. But in the current situation, a lot of people are asking about schoolwork as well. A lot of schools are sending the parents work, and they're trying to manage doing that work that the school has sent, while also entertaining a toddler, whilst also working from home. Any advice you can give to those parents? Laura, should we go to you?
Sure. Yeah, so I've got my 4 kids who I'm home educating and also working as well, and my husband is home as well, and he's also working. So I'm really grateful that we're able to tag team when we need to as well, which is really helpful. I do think, I mean, when lockdown started, there was talking to some of my friends, some people had an enormous amount of work sent home from school, and some people just got sent a few links, have a look at this, and then just enjoy your time together. And I can't help but think maybe some schools are over-resourcing just to make sure that parents have enough to go by, and that they don't feel like they're on their own trying to figure this all out on their own, basically. But I've also heard some stories where schools are quite strict and are calling home like, why haven't you finished this work and stuff. And I guess my response is there has to be grace. You have to have grace for yourself in this season, because this is a situation that we've never faced before, and the whole world is facing it together. And so we need to have grace for ourselves. We can only do what we can do, and if we're trying to homeschool as well as working, we can only do our best, and sometimes that's not much work at all for the kids. But if you're trying your best, what more can you do? And I think grace for yourself is super important, but also schools are going to have grace for parents, because parents have suddenly become teachers and have never been teachers before. Well, some of you might have done, but this is brand new. And I think especially for those who have who are perhaps single parents who are trying to work from home and homeschool their kids, there's just no way you can do all of what the kids would be doing at school from 9 till 3, as well as work, as well as stay sane. So there has to be grace. And I think when the children go back to school, there will be a catch-up time for them. Teachers will be going over the stuff that they would have been doing. And I think the whole world is going to be playing catch up. And so there will be grace. There has to be grace, because some people are working super hard to get all these boxes ticked and all the kids learning everything. And then some people are not doing any of the work. So when all the kids come back to school, there will have to be a catch up time. And I'm not suggesting that you don't do any work, but I am suggesting that there is grace. You have to have grace for yourself, and schools will have to have grace for what you're having to face right now.
Yeah, just a few thoughts on that as well. I agree completely with Laura. I think people are in different situations. My husband works at home anyway, so we already have a few things in place, like if he has a call from a client, we call that a code red. So we know we've got to be completely quiet. We've got to find a place in the house where we're not going to be disturbing him, because obviously that's very important. And I know a lot of you now are in that situation with, you're all working at home, you're schooling at home. And so you'll come up with these strategies. Probably you've already come up with some yourselves already. I think if you're looking at primary school work, I think what I would do if I was assigned work by a school, I think I'd take a look at it and sort of step back and look at it and think, what are they wanting me to achieve from this work that they've set? Now, say it's maths, say the end thing they want you to achieve is, you know, that all the times tables are up to date or something like that, then how can I make that part of, how can I make that not be school at home, but something that we can do that's fun? So like Laura was saying last week about the trampoline, you can certainly go onto the trampoline and you could say to them one time, well, it's probably harder than 1 times 1, but you could shout out the times table and they could bounce and answer back to you, something like that. They could do, you know, hopscotch on the floor, or there could be a way that you can, instead of saying, right, let's get this heavy burden that we've been given by school, let's get this, just knuckle down everybody, get it done. There can be a way, if you look at it as a whole and think, even another good thing I've heard is count the days. So count the days from now till end of term and think, okay, we've got this amount of days. Now say one day your son or daughter really is not in the zone for maths. You know, in the back of your mind, you've got 30, 40 days coming up. Maybe one of those days, or hopefully more than that, they will be in the zone and you can really focus on maths that day. So there's things like that you can apply that doesn't have to be a burden on you. It can be fun as well, and they can be learning at the same time. With English type topics, again, look back, what are they trying to, is it grammar, is it punctuation? What is it they're trying to, what's the end game for what they're trying to achieve with the work they've set for you? Now, I mean, I love reading, so I'll always come back to this, but reading aloud, we found if we read a page each from a book, my son George, he likes to put on the voices when he reads, so he'll stand up and he reads out loud and he puts funny voices on and things like that. And then one day I was looking at it and I thought, in order for him to know when to put the voices in, he's got to work out, this is that person speaking at the moment, therefore that's your grammar, speech marks. It might say at the end of the sentence, he shouted. So then he'll go back and go, oh, he shouted, and then he'll want to read it again in a loud voice. Now, all of that in its simplest form, it's just you as a family reading aloud. But when you pull it apart, you are actually covering punctuation, grammar, enunciation is the word, when your voice, the way you speak, and hopefully you're all enjoying it. All ages are enjoying it, and you are covering the task that's been assigned by the school, that, you know, this is what we want them to have achieved this by the time they return to school. So I think that's the way I would approach it. For my own anxiety levels and things like that, I would look at it and think, how can we do this, but do it so it looks like our family, not so it looks like school at home.
It's really helpful. We had some feedback from a good friend of ours, Lou, who said that she got some work back from school, and she emailed the teachers and said, we're going to get the work done, but it's going to be in a different way to how you've set the work. And the teachers were absolutely fine with that, as long as, you know, that her daughter was learning what they'd asked her to learn. They just found their own way of doing it, because she's got two other little ones. So yeah, that's really helpful. Laura, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just on that note, it's really important to communicate with the schools and the teachers as well. And if you're struggling, just tell the teachers, could I try this? Is there a different way? Because this is my situation and I'm struggling to keep up with the work you're setting. And, you know, working well with your schools and with the teachers is really important. Just build on your relationship with them, and you know, how can I do this well that doesn't leave you in a sticky situation when the kids come back? How can I support you well, but also how can you support me, because this is my situation and this is what I'm finding hard. Like, don't be afraid to communicate with the schools and try and work out a way that you can figure it out together.
I've seen a lot on social media from teachers, actually, just saying, take the pressure off yourself and focus on connection with your children, because this is such a strange time, and a lot of children will be feeling it as well, just feeling, you know, everything's changed, what's going on, why can't I see my friends, why can't I go to school anymore? So just to focus on that connection time, a lot of teachers have been posting, don't worry, we'll catch them up once we come back to school, just just do what you can and focus on connection, which I think is so releasing. Another question that came up was how to get your child to focus, because obviously for the children who normally go to a school, they're now having to learn at home, and home has always been that kind of place of play. So how do you kind of help them to get into the zone of learning and of doing school while they're at home?
Looking back, I had a couple of reluctant writers in my family. And I read somewhere that if you try to get them to write one word really well, like the best of their ability, and I was thinking, this, I don't know if I'm going along with this one, if one word can't be enough, but we tried it because they were so reluctant. I mean, there was tears, you know, it was, I can't hold my pen, I'm going to scribble instead of write. It was just, it wasn't pleasant, shall we say. So I thought, okay, let's try this. So I said to them, all I want you to do is write one word on this page, but it's got to be the best writing you can ever do. So they were perfectly happy to do this one word, because, and then they could hardly believe that I said, right, you can stop now, because if that's your best, you can stop. And I could hardly believe I was saying you could stop, because it really wasn't enough. But the end product is what you're looking for, is you want them to do their best, to give their best. So looking at the bigger picture, it was eventually, now, of course, now, 7 years on, they don't only write one word. Daniel's writing his history essays, and, you know, just let slip who it was there. But anyway, so it's some things you do, you sort of don't understand at the time how they are going to benefit them. So don't get too worried about if they're not in the zone that day, or if you think, have we really achieved enough this day? And I was thinking of that film, I don't know if you've seen, but the Karate Kid, like the original Karate Kid. And Mr. Miyagi gets him to paint the fence and wash the car and things like that. And you think, and he's thinking, this doesn't mean anything, right? How is this helping me learn karate? And then obviously, if you know the film, Mr. Miyagi comes in and they have this sort of karate, whatever, to-ing, fro-ing. And a lot of education that you do feels a little bit like that. You sort of, there's these little things you put in place that may not what you see as enough. Like, this is not a full page of writing, this is one very neat word. But you're leading on to something, and you're building within their character. Do your best, you know, try your hardest, and that leads to an end result which is far more beneficial than you and them crying over the page because they're not in the zone. You're frustrated, they're frustrated. You know, that's not going to lead anywhere satisfactory, really. So I think, again, give yourself grace. It's their lockdown as well, like we said before. They're struggling as well. They're now having to see you. Are you my mom? Are you my teacher? You know, what's going on? So let them be honest with you and say, look, I'm really not in the zone for maths today, or I'm not in the zone for this. Can I do more writing, they might say to you, and you say, okay, yeah, do more writing today. Be flexible, I suppose, is the answer again, coming back to that. Be flexible.
Thanks for that, Natalie. I think as well, having I found having a set, like a specific space to do your work is really helpful. So we'll always kind of sit down at the table, and he knows that's, and it's funny because I think subconsciously, so we all have our places around the table when we eat, but when we do school, Eli always moves to the place next to him. So it's like that's his school chair and this is his eating chair. But he did that without me, suggesting it or anything. So it's almost like he needs to sit in this chair to get into the zone and to get his mind focusing on school. But then when he sits in the other chair, he can relax a bit more because it's mealtime. So I would say just having a set space for where you do school might help them to focus, because they just get in the zone when they're in a literal zone. Did you have something to add, Laura?
Yes, I did. That's super helpful actually, Natalie, because I can really relate to the tears and stress over writing. So I'm definitely going to give that a try. I think that's going to be super helpful. I think as well it's good to note the time, because I think we all have a productive time of day. So for my kids, I know that they're a lot more productive in the morning than in the afternoon. If I try and get them to do sit down work in the afternoon, it's so much more harder than if we do it in the morning. And I've also spoken to some parents who have teenagers who just say morning is out of the question. I just let them sleep till they need to sleep till, and then when they get up, they'll do their work. So I think it's really good to find where is their time where they feel most alert and focused and productive, and go with that. Also, I think it's worth mentioning something that I discovered when we started home educating was just because when I started, we would do 9 till 3, and I would follow the timetable as if they were at school. But I read somewhere, and I've heard lots of places since then, that actually, if you think about their school day from 9 till 3, they'll have their break times, they'll have their lunch times, they'll have their chatting times with the class, they'll have the coming to the carpet and sitting down time, going back to the table, sitting down, hanging your coats up, hanging your bags up, going to the toilet, all these assemblies, all these things that make up a lot of their time during their school day. So the actual amount of time that they would sit down and do work would only amount to around 2 or 3 hours a day. And when I discovered that, I was like, just a weight came off my shoulders. So I was like, okay, that makes more sense. So my aim has always been like 2, maybe 3 hours a day of work. And I've noticed in the kids that they can't focus for much more than that anyway. They need to be up and about. They've got heaps of energy, and their imaginations just need to have time to, they go and play. And we talked about that last time, of just how important play is. They digest what they've learned. They start just as they do like mums and dads, we call it, playing that, and you start to see them starting to put things that they've learned into their games, and they're just kind of processing what they've learned. So yeah.
Okay, so last question. What if schools have sent home work for your children and you don't understand the work? I know obviously our children don't go to school, so we're not in that boat, but we've certainly had work for our kids that we've not necessarily understood, which is exposing to me because my child's in reception. What's a sphere again? No, but what do you do when you're having to teach your child something that you don't understand yourself?
Going back to the history work that I've been doing with Daniel, GCSE type level, I've been amazed at the amount of resources that are out there. Because back in my day, you just had a book, but you can find YouTubes on any topic really, of any sort of question that might come up in a GCSE history essay. There'll be definitely YouTube videos on it. There's podcasts, there's, you search up, and it's just amazing the wealth of material that's out there. So again, we looked at that together. He could have looked at it himself, I suppose, and he did listen to some of the podcasts about it himself. but we've just found it quite fascinating finding all the different places where people have posted help on this. And so I think for the older age group level, there is, and the younger age group, if like with English, if you forgot what, a parent thesis is, or I don't know, even an adverb, then you can certainly Google it and get the description. So again, just not putting yourself in the position of as an expert and thinking, okay, oh, I forgot that, or I don't know that, let's look at it together. And then it becomes another time where you have a connection with your child and another opportunity of discovering something again together, which is the beauty of it, really.
Yeah, I think that's been the journey that we've been on as well, is just learning together, and also just teaching them how to find things out, and then is a skill in itself. Like if they ask me a question, I'm like, I don't know, but go and find out and then come and tell me. And then they're learning how to find out information, learning how to understand that information and then communicate it back to me, is a whole array of skills. So I try to do that, and also just teaching them how to find things out, like, oh mummy, how do you spell this, how do you spell that, and I'm like, just pass them my phone, so then they'll be like, how do you spell? And just learning, how do I find out information? And my oldest daughter's recently been doing some algebra, and she's like, mummy, I need help, I don't understand this. And I sat down with her like, but we worked on it together, and it took us like 20 minutes on one sum, but because she was like, well, I've got 4 out of 5, so I'll just move on. And I'm like, well, no, because neither of us understand how to do this question, and it's important that you know. So let's just spend a bit of time on understanding this together, and then when I understand it, then I can help the others when they get to those kind of questions, or I can help remind Maya, my oldest, oh, remember when we did that question, and this is da 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 da. So I'm actually enjoying relearning things that I learned in high school that I have forgotten. So yeah.
That's really great. Thank you, guys. You've just got so much wisdom. It's been so helpful to me, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching as well. So just remember, if you have any questions, anything you'd like us to discuss, to just email us in your questions, comments, feedback. That would be wonderful, and we will do another one next week. So thank you, guys. God bless.
Thanks for watching. We hope that was really useful for you. We're going to be placing links to any of the resources that we talked about in the video in the description. Also, if you have any questions or anything you'd like us to discuss, we will try our best to answer them. Just email us at manchester@catchthefire.com.